Hello guys, in this video tutorial we are going to learn about hover, CSS hover, which is the CSS pseudo element or class pseudo element and classes. Okay, back to our previous tutorial. What we did here is known as a pseudo class. Okay, this is a class, this is a selector, sorry, and this is a pseudo class. This is a pseudo class. You might ask, what is a pseudo class? A pseudo class is used to define a special state of an element. A pseudo class is used to define a special state of an element, like the one we did here when we are talking about the length.html. Okay, let me try to run this code again. Revealing Explorer. I double click on it. Okay, this is a state. When you have visited, it shows this. When you have not visited, it shows this. So we're using a pseudo class to determine a state, okay, of an element. I believe we know what is an element. So it shows a special state. We use it to define a special state of an element. Okay, back to this, what we have. I am going to be bringing more about these pseudo classes. Okay, let me just write a header here. This should be header 1. Okay, let me just say header 1. Okay, let's run this code. I want to write a CSS that once you move your mouse over this, it will change color. If you remove your mouse, the color return back to black. If you move your mouse over it, it will change color maybe to blue. If you remove your mouse, the color goes back to black. So we are going to use a pseudo class to determine or define the state of that element. Okay. The name of this pseudo class we want to use now is known as hover. We can say, using a header selector, header 1, we now use column. Anytime you want to write a pseudo class, I say column hover. Okay, it simply means anytime I hover my mouse over any header 1 that is making use of this CSS, let the color change to blue. Okay, then let the font size change to 77 ps. Okay, let the font family, which is the font itself, change to Verdana. Okay, so anytime I hover over hedge 1, color will be blue, font size 77, font family is Verdana. Let's test this code. Okay, I refresh. You see, if I hover over this header 1, you see that the color changes and the size increases. If I remove my mouse, you see, if I hover over, you see, if I remove my mouse, you see. Okay, let me just remove this font size. Now if I remove my mouse, the font size will not increase, but the color will change and the font family will change. Okay, let me refresh this code. See, now if I hover over, you see the color changes and the font family changes. Remove my mouse, it comes back to the former state. Okay, this is an example of pseudo classes, using it to define a state of an element. Okay, this is for the hover. There's another one we have as check. This one normally works in a checkbox. So let me just create a checkbox here. We have talked about form in our HTML class. Okay, let me say input type. Input type is checkbox. Okay, it's a checkbox. This checkbox will be for, let me say, Gary. Okay, I duplicate this. Most of us may not know what Gary is all about. Let me use rice, something that is generally acceptable by the world. Let me use beans. Okay, then let me use yam here. Okay, now we have these three checkboxes. Let me refresh. Okay, we have these three checkboxes. Let me first of all use CSS to increase their size. Okay, let me just give them a class. Let me call this class CK. Okay, let me call the class CK, the class CK. Okay, coming back to my CSS, I'm going to write about the CK class. Okay, CK class, you'll be using the font size of 55 px so that this thing will be increased. Okay, and let me not change the color. Let me just say this class use font size of 55. Back to our code. Okay, I'm not seeing anything happening here. Okay, yes, you are not going to see because there is no text beside. Okay, I have. Yes, this text doesn't affect this. This is a single tag. Okay. So since this thing is not an element, since this thing is an input form, a single tag, I will not use font size to increase it. I will use what we call zoom. Okay, I will say zoom. Zoom is 2. That is times 2 of what we have here. Okay, refresh. See that this thing has actually increased because I zoom it using the CSS zoom property. Okay, now we want to talk about the pseudo class. I can do something like this. The CK is to checked. Okay, let the color be red. Okay, what I'm trying to say here is that anytime I click on this, remember this tag or element is making use of this class CK. Anytime I checked on any of these checkbox, let the color be red. Okay, this is what we are trying to tell computer to do. Coming back to my web browser, I refresh. Okay, let me check on this. See, the color changes to blue. Check on this. Check on this. I'm not seeing the red. Okay, let me go back to the code. Okay guys, I don't have to write it through the class. I have to write it through the tag name, which is input. Okay, it says anytime I checked on the input, let the color be red. Okay guys, I am using this class to zoom in, but if I want to determine the checked one and color it instantly, I use something like this, input checked. Okay, let's have a look at this code. Refresh and refresh. Okay, checked on it, checked on it, checked on it. Oh, it's still not working. Something is wrong, guys. Actually, this is CSS. CSS doesn't normally work like JavaScript. So let me check it with code. Okay, let me just check this one. Okay, let me check this one. Let me refresh this code and see what will happen. Okay, the one that is checked. What happened? I'm not seeing the color. Okay, I'm so sorry guys. I just noticed something now. Actually, you cannot change the color of a text box using CSS. You cannot change the color. So let me not check this. Okay, so let me come to the code and says any checked stuff, I can still use the CK. Okay, any stock, any text box that will checked, zoom it instead of changing the color. Okay, zoom it to ×4. Zoom it to ×4. Okay, let me explain what I did here before we test this code. What I did here is we says any text box that has this class CK, zoom ×2. If I checked you, that is if I mark you, zoom ×4. Now in our HTML file, we have this one known as rise. Okay, let me remove this. We don't color this. Okay, we have the one known as rise using the class CK, beans using the same class, yam using the same class. Okay, whenever we checked on any of them, they will zoom from 2 times to 4 times. Okay, so let me refresh again. See now, if I checked on this rice, you see that this rice has zoomed. Checked on this yam has zoomed. Checked on this, it has zoomed. If I remove the check, you see. So the idea is that we use this pseudo class to determine what will happen to that element, especially checkbox, when we checked on it. Okay guys, we'll continue with our pseudo classes. We equally have the one known as disabled and the one known as focus, right? Okay, let me just copy this, talk about the disabled one, talk about the focus. Let me say check.disabled, zoom it to 6 × 6. Okay, what about focus? For focus, we are changing the background color. Okay, let me still zoom it. Let me zoom this one to 5. Okay, focus is zoomed to 5. Disabled is zoomed to 6. Okay, you know by default here we cannot disable this here, so we have to write a code that will disable it. So let me disable this here and write a code here, disabled. I am disabling the rise. So when we test our code, you see that the rise will zoom the bit. You see it because rise is disabled. So this is how we do it in CSS, picking out the disabled checkbox. Focus now is talking about when we are typing on that box. Now since we are using a checkbox, we can't type in a checkbox, so I'm going to create a text box this time around. Let me call this one text box. Let me call it text box. This here I have changed it to text box, and remember this here is using the same class, and here it says any element using this class CK on focus, zoom to ×5. Okay, coming back to my code, see this has changed to the yam have changed to a text box. Okay, let me focus on it by clicking on it. See, it has now increases. If I go out, that is no more focus, it reduces. Click on it, it now increases. Okay, since this is text box, there's a whole lot of CSS that can work on this. I can come back to my CSS and say don't zoom too much. Okay, you can zoom to ×3. Remember, initially it's ×2. Now zoom from ×2 to ×3, and as you zoom, change the border. Okay, change the border to 2 ps. Okay, let me say change the border to 4 ps, solid red. Okay, then change the background color to hash 1 2 3. Okay, this is the color code for hash. Or do I use pink? Change the background color to pink. Okay, so back to our code here. I refresh. Okay, nothing happens. If I click on it now, You see the border size has increased to red and the background color has changed to pink. If I remove the focus, it comes back to this. Click on the focus, it shows this again. So that is it for this. There are a whole lot of pseudo classes. There are more than 50. Okay, so we are picking on the ones that are used commonly, and when we are learning our materialize or bootstrap, they already have these codes. So the purpose of learning this is that you can manipulate it to your test if what bootstrap has or what materialize has is not exactly what you want to do. Okay guys, bye bye, thank you so much.